Susanne Schmidt. Let's give her a warm welcome.
That is a tall man. No, I'm just short. Thank you for that. So for 2 weeks every summer, my family and my best friend's family would leave our comfortable suburban home and we'd head out onto the shores of Long Island to do extreme camping. Now I have to tell you, camping today is nothing like it was back in the 60s. My kids have this whisper-thin tent. You can fold this up and put it in your pocket. It weighs like 3 pounds and it dries in an hour. We had government-issued military canvas. These things weighed 150 pounds. They had 27 interlocking poles that had to fit together exactly or the thing would just collapse on you while you slept. The first day we bought this, it smelled like 100 sweaty soldiers that slept on this thing. I think the last time we camped in it was like 1971. It's still drying in my mother's room. So 2 mothers, 2 fathers, and 6 children would load 4,000 pounds of camping gear into these 2 little boats, and we'd head out into this tiny remote peninsula. And it would take us an entire day to get there and set up our camp. But for the next 2 weeks, it was like Lord of the Flies meets Swiss Family Robinson. The rules that applied to designated camping areas didn't apply to us. We would rise and sleep whenever we wanted to. Not only wouldn't we wait a half an hour to go in the water after we ate, sometimes we would eat our lunch in the water. These were the best 2 weeks of our lives. At night, we'd tumble into our skanky, smelly tents, and we'd fall asleep to the low murmur of our parents talking around the campfire. It was the kind of talking that you only heard when you were with grown-ups that truly loved each other and were kind of drunk. The family that we camped with were 3rd-generation friends. Our grandmothers had come over into Ellis Island together. My father and my Uncle Bill had grown up as only children, and they both lost their fathers very early in life. My best friend to this day was the youngest daughter in this family. So the thing we didn't know when we were camping is right around the corner of our very remote peninsula was a bar. And so every night after dinner, the fathers would say, "We need to go blow the gas out of the engines, we'll be back." And they'd hop into the boats and they'd head off. And they'd come back like 2 hours later, really happy to see us. And so on this one particular night, the mothers looked at the fathers and they said, "We are going to go blow the gas out of the lines. You are in charge of the children." Now, I have to stop and just tell you, all 6 of the children are still alive. And my father and my Uncle Bill were great fathers, and they had been in charge of us individually on many occasions. But as most of you know, fathers in the 70s had this little voice in their head when they were alone with their children just before something ridiculous happened that would say, "This could end badly, don't do it." But when you put my father and my Uncle Bill together, that voice changed to the question, what's the worst that could happen? So the mothers go off to blow the gas out of the lines. The fathers look at the children and they say, "You will collect the wood." And we say, "Yes, fathers, we will," because we know something amazing is going to happen. And so we scurry off and we come back with the 2 kinds of wood that kids find, which are those tiny little twigs that burn in 11 seconds and giant water-soaked tree chunks. And we throw these into the fire pit. And of course, there's no way these are going to burn. So my brother says, "Why don't we throw some gas on it?" My father starts to say, "I don't think that's a good," and my Uncle Bill says, "That's a great idea. What's the worst that could happen?" So we dump a couple of gallons of fuel into the fire pit. My father goes to light a match. The kids take a step back. He throws it in. Nothing happens. He lights a second match. He throws it in. We take another step back. Nothing happens. My brother starts to say, "I think we need more." This explosion licks up to the heavens. There are flames 30 feet in the air. There's a mushroom cloud that blows my father back on his ass 4 feet. My uncle goes over and goes, "That was close." And my father's like, "I know." At this point, the children are screaming, "This is great!" shores of Connecticut. Because the Bridgeport police called the Harbor Patrol, who sent every boat in the Coast Guard charging towards the beachhead. The other place you could see this blast from was the bar, where the mothers were blowing out the gas in the line. Simultaneously, the Coast Guard and the mothers are charging towards the beachhead. My uncle looks at my father, he's like, this is going to end badly. My father's like, I know. I looked at my dad and I said, I have always loved you. I'm going to miss you so much. The Coast Guard get to the beach first. They set up a perimeter. The mothers break through. The kids are instantly banished to the tent. But we can hear the negotiations. The fathers agree that their fatal flaw in the plan was allowing the children to collect the firewood. The Coast Guard agrees to let us spend the night if we move to the designated camping area. The mothers agree not to kill the fathers in their sleep. So the next morning, 2 mothers, 2 fathers, and 6 children load 4,000 pounds of camping gear back into the boats, and we spend the rest of our vacation at the designated camping area. We wait a half an hour after we eat. We sit around a tiny little fire encased in a little metal Coast Guard ring, looking longingly at the fathers, thinking, when are the mothers going to get desperate enough to leave us alone with you again? In 2006, my uncle died after a very long struggle with lung cancer. And 10 weeks later, when my father died, the 6 children determined that the cause of his death was a broken heart. We had my uncle cremated in Florida, where he had gone to live with my best friend. I had my dad cremated in Vermont, where he had come to live with me. And we brought their ashes back to Long Island. We placed them in a box. We dumped in lighter fluid. We set it on fire, and we sent it out into the Long Island Sound. We hadn't really accounted for the tide and the current, because as the flaming box of our fathers started to float past the Coast Guard station, and they jumped into the boats, and just as they were about to overtake the box, it got swamped by a wave, and the box started to sink. I swear I could hear my Uncle Bill say, that was close. And my father say, I know. I don't think anybody else heard that. But if you were within a mile of the shoreline that day, you could definitely hear the cries of the 6 children on the shore saying, we love the fathers!